Hello, I'm Dean Martin with Transmission Digest. Welcome to the Transtar Industries studios here at Babcox Media.
As the saying goes, little things do mean a lot. This is especially true when it comes to a valve body on an automatic transmission. Some valve bodies are more difficult than others. For instance, what I have here is a Gen 1 6R80 valve body. What that means is that it actually has an internal TCM, or it's a TECM unit, as we say. The TCM is right here. It also has RPM speed sensors, an internal mode switch, and it's the collector plate for all the solenoids. Before I do anything with this, I want to bring your attention to the valve body to case seal. Anytime these are done, these should be replaced because they're bad about cracking, and you don't want to have internal cross leaks because of this. So always replace this when it's done, when you're rebuilding the transmission. I'm going to pop this off. I need to be careful with this because if you happen to touch the pins, you could actually get an electrostatic charge that could zap the computer, and you don't want to do that. When you disassemble this, there are special length bolts for the TECM unit as well as for the valve body. And when you put it back together, make sure that you put them in the right place. I have, of course, taken out most of them. And again, like I said, when you go to remove the solenoid collector plate, be real careful. There are lineup pins that are fairly snug in the valve body, along with the stab locks that hold this plate to the solenoids. So make sure when you're taking this off that you don't put too much force on it, because after all, it is just plastic. And these are the stab locks for the solenoids. And I'm going to flip this back over. And what I'm taking off now, this is actually the lower body. And this contains the solenoids, valve trains, but there's really no small parts in this section. A word about the separator plate. These are not bonded separator plates, however, they do have silicone beads. It's always a good idea to replace this plate, especially if you see any breaks in any of these silicone beads, and there are specific model numbers based on what you're working on. What I want to bring your attention to are all the small components in this valve body. And you can have a lot of things. On this particular valve body, there's a couple of spring-loaded poppet valves. You have internal screens. There's 2 of them. There are also 8 check balls, and it's always a good idea that before you take check balls out, that you etch the pocket so you know where it goes back in, because sometimes there will be a check ball pocket, but it doesn't take an actual check ball, and you don't want to create a problem by putting the ball in the wrong hole. So always mark the position of the check balls themselves. In addition, these have what we call solenoid dampers, and depending on model, you can have 2 or 6. And a word about these dampers: although these are aluminum, they have rubber tips, and these should always be replaced. When you get a rebuilding kit, these rubber tips will be in the rebuilding kit, so it's always a good idea to replace them. What I want to bring your attention to is the valve train themselves. Again, when you split a valve body, you have all these loose parts that fall out. A lot of builders will just get a screwdriver or scribe and flick the valves to see if they're free or not. That's not always the best thing to do, because you can have a worn valve, worn bore, or in this case, an issue with the end plug retainer. And this is a bobby pin, not what girls put in their hair, but this is actually a wire type of retaining clip, and these can wear, they can also break, and if you don't take them out, you may not know it. Sometimes, depending on valve body, some of these clips can be inboard, and you don't even notice it unless you take the valve train out. A word about taking these out: sometimes when you go to remove a valve train, you pull the retainer and you can't get this plug out. It's because this retainer will create burrs on the end of this plug, preventing it from coming out. One way to get it out is actually shove inward on it. When you shove inward, it can flatten those dimples to make it easier to get the plug out. But the point is, it's not only the loose components when you split a valve body, it's also what holds valves and springs into the valve body. And you don't want to gamble on a transmission failure because this clip happens to break because it's worn half in two. Ford actually sells a kit. When you buy them, it's a set of 4, and they're not expensive. You do want to look at it because this valve body has several of these hairpin clips that goes into the upper as well as the lower body. So when you do a valve body, don't just focus on what might fall out when you split it. Also focus on what is retaining the valve train, and make sure, if it's required, replace those clips. I'm Mike Riley. Thanks for watching. See you next time.